Hello, and thank you for joining us while we talk to the three artists involved with our 2021 edition of London Art Fair's platform. The theme of platform this year is folk art. These clips are taken from longer interviews with the artists, but hopefully provide some insight into their thoughts. All three artists choose to look at history and its part in our cultural heritage. First, we're going to talk to Cecilia Charlton. Hi, Cecilia. Your work references cultural histories, particularly American and Italian, while bringing together traditions of fine art and craft and abstraction and folk art. What do you feel is the meaning or importance of folk art to you personally?
How I do understand it to mean is that it's a creative process that is carried on from within a community instead of discovered by an individual. So that's, to me, one of the main distinctions between folk art and fine art. You could almost consider painting for a large portion of history to also be a folk art because of the way traditions were communicated within a community and within a workshop structure. But then within the context of my art history education, that painting kind of marks this divergence of painting into fine art, where each individual artist has their own vision and their own genius to communicate to the world. And they do that by themselves in isolation, without the community aspect.
You talk about a visit to Italy and how this was a turning point for you, and it was when you moved away from painting and into working with threads.
Going to Venice, we also went to Florence. And so going to Venice and Florence, coming from the States where we have our own rich tapestry of cultural places that you can visit, but nothing like Venice or Florence, just completely saturated with Renaissance art. And so I was just completely gobsmacked by, in particular, the patterns that you see in the mosaics on the floors. What I found so interesting was the ingenuity of the craftspeople that had made them at the time. It proved to me yet again how humans seek to discover something new. There was just no end to the variety of patterns that you could find in the floors. And those kinds of moments always really move me, because you don't have to make 50 different patterns on the floor. You could do the floor all in one pattern, but they just felt compelled to discover something.
With access to the physical world restricted in early 2020, Katharine Le Hardy found herself turning to the internet for inspiration, discovering images that have led to these wonderful paintings that address the universal cultural heritage of play.
You discovered during that time when you couldn't access the physical world all these historic images of children at play. And I was wondering whether you find these to be inspiring or nostalgic or both, and how you came about encountering them and what it meant to you.
The thing that really struck a chord for me was going to the local parks and seeing the playgrounds empty. And it's something that is just eerie and unusual, somewhere that's sort of so full of life, suddenly being completely silent and empty. I've never used any imagery from the internet before. It's just not something that I ever needed to do or wanted to do. The images that I was finding most interesting were the ones of the children playing, not the abandoned playgrounds that I had been researching, which was really interesting to me. Having painted empty places for so long, suddenly having life in them, which I think we were probably craving at that point, suddenly having life in them seemed really important to me. And if you'd said to me a year ago I'd be painting pictures with humans in them, I would have never believed you. Not something that interested me at all, but I think in this moment of quiet, we were all craving this human contact, I suppose, weren't we? We all just desperately wanted to see people and we were told we couldn't. Suddenly that's what I was drawn to. And the images I was finding online were often old images, black and white, and then I'd not only be inhabiting my paintings with humans, but I would also be kind of inventing the colour and actually The paintings are really colourful and the images are black and white, and that's something I've also never done before. So it was all change at that moment.
But you actually said, which I think is interesting, you actually said a few minutes ago that when you thought that you were going to be inspired and interested by these deserted playgrounds, but actually what you found yourself really drawn to was the togetherness of the play. And I think that's something that really comes across in the works that we've got here as part of Platform, is that it's about the togetherness. And I wonder if there's a particular poignance to that now, consciously or subconsciously.
Yeah, I mean, it was completely subconscious. The idea of, I mean, I found this image of the hula hooping children, which I loved when I was doing my research into the abandoned playgrounds, etc. And I thought it was just something that I might enjoy painting because I love, you know, the visual side of it. I love the shapes and the pattern that it almost made. I just put it aside, and I never thought it would become anything, because I thought it was so different to what I've been looking at. Being in this crisis, we're just craving something completely different, and I just accepted that the whole project kind of was coming together, and actually that is what I was interested in, and that is completely a reaction to needing people in my life and realizing how important it is and how important the play is to our children.
Now we're going to talk with Candida Stevens, who also works with Stitch. Candida is influenced by Buddhism and has made a new series of work looking at folk traditions. And we're going to talk to Candida about one of the chosen motifs, the prayer flag.
I thought it was interesting that you referred to the Tibetan flag as being something that's so delicate and yet so powerful. And I felt like there was a lot behind that. I wondered if you wanted to elaborate at all.
Yes, I think they're a good analogy for human life in a way, because I mean, like if you buy them from a shop, for instance, kind of they'll often come sort of, they're all kind of curled up very tightly, and so you have to kind of unravel them, and sort of they're in a certain like order of colours. So you've got blue, which is the sky, you've got white, which is air and wind, then you've got red, which is fire, then you've got green, which is water, and then yellow, which is earth. And they need to be in balance for life to happen, well, on this planet anyway. So it's kind of, if any one of those is missing, life doesn't exist. And also each flag will have a prayer or a mantra. Generally, the idea behind it is that kind of like when they're hung with an intent. When the wind catches them, it sort of scatters the prayers for well-being and for, you know, wisdom, compassion, all those things out to the world, out into the universe. It's sort of like they're for everybody. But over time, obviously, they fade and they become very frayed and tattered, and eventually they disintegrate. And I feel that's like a really good analogy for human life, because it's kind of we have to unravel these things in ourselves. They don't just happen. There has to be some sort of volition on our part, you know, so to unravel these things. But once unraveled, kind of like, you know, they flow out, and even after kind of we've gone, those things are still part of kind of life. Those things that we put out there are still out there in some form or capacity.
I'd like to say thank you to all the artists for joining and sharing with us their thoughts, and thank you to you for joining us. I hope this was interesting, and while clearly disappointing not to be open for viewings in London as planned, we're very much open in the gallery for Zoom viewings and inquiries of any sort, so please don't hesitate to get in touch in the usual ways if you would wish to.